right? That machine pursues some procedure or method whereby the good and the bad apples are separated. And now here's the $64,000 question. Are you all awake? Would it be possible to devise such a machine, that is, put together such a method, if you did not know in advance a good apple from a bad apple? What if I was new to this whole realm? Let's say I had never been exposed to apples in my life. I hardly knew what an apple was. And I inherit this orchard. And then I'm going to build a machine that separates the good apples from the bad apples when I know nothing about apples. What's the likelihood of success? Oh, nearly zero. I suppose if this universe has any kind of randomness to it, I might accidentally make a machine that does it. What I'm getting at is, if you don't know something about apples to begin with, you can't devise a method for separating them. And in the same way, if you don't know something about the universe to begin with, if you don't know something about reality to begin with, if you don't know something about the difference between truth and error about the universe to begin with, you can't devise a method that separates the true conclusions from the false conclusions about reality, can you? You can't even devise an epistemology, an apple sorting machine, unless you already know something about reality. You already know something about the apples to begin with. Everyone begins with a worldview. Everyone begins with a certain view of reality. And in terms of that reality, or that perception, that conception of reality, you devise your epistemology, your theory of knowledge. And so neutrality is indeed impossible. What I've been arguing against here is called philosophical Methodism. It has nothing to do with the Methodist Church. Philosophical Methodism is the view that method takes precedence over every other consideration in philosophy. One first gains a method of knowing, and then you argue about ethics. Then you argue about metaphysics. And the apple sorting machine story was simply to illustrate the impossibility of philosophical Methodism. Nobody has a theory of knowledge that is neutral. All right, so we've gotten the point across that no one is neutral. We've gotten the point across that people have worldviews that control their thinking. And now the question that was asked last night, and I said you have to sleep on it, well, what are we going to do then when two worldviews come up against one another? How are we going to argue with the unbeliever? You need to realize that every system of thought has a starting point which verifies itself. And that's not the sort of thing you're going to hear at the university. People don't like to admit that, but it's inescapable. Every system of thought has what we call a self-attesting authority for itself. For you see, every system of thought, when it develops its apple sorting machine, is going to have to verify and verify and verify the claims that are made, but eventually is going to stop verifying and saying that's just it, that's the obvious. Because no argument runs on and on and on and on. Every system of thought gets to the place where they say that's the most basic standard for knowing. And then if you ask the question, well, how do you know that that's the right standard? A person is either going to have to offer that standard as the verification of the standard, or is going to look at something else outside of that standard to verify the standard. Now, if you look at something outside of that standard, is the standard the ultimate one? Obviously not, because what you look at that point becomes more ultimate than what you called your ultimate standard. So now we've got to start the question all over again. Now that thing that you appealed to, is it an ultimate standard? If it's an ultimate standard, it is going to have to authorize itself or appeal to something outside of itself. If it appeals to something outside of itself, is it the ultimate standard? No, I mean, this is getting boring, Dr. Bahnsen. Move on. You all get the point, don't you? In the nature of the case, an ultimate standard must authorize itself. And that's why unbelieving systems of thought have to be pressed to see that they have got an ultimate authority for their thinking, just like you have an ultimate authority for your thinking. And when it gets around to verifying that ultimate authority over against the other person's ultimate authority, I will end up eventually assuming my ultimate authority. But so will the unbeliever. The unbeliever will assume his or her ultimate authority in the process of reasoning, and I will assume my ultimate authority in the process of reasoning, even when we're talking about what the ultimate authority should be. And you're going, Dr. Bahnsen, how are we going to get through this then? It seems like they're going to be, sealed off from any witness, any effective defense, just like we are. It's going to be, we're in different towers yelling at each other, but never able to get together, never have any meaningful intellectual contact. There is no neutrality. Worldviews tend to be self-attesting. That is, they assume an ultimate authority which authorizes itself. So how do we reason with these people? The question that we're going to be asking in one form or another is, which worldview makes human experience intelligible? Which worldview makes human experience intelligible? Which worldview comports with those things that the Christian and the non-Christian both say or do? Earlier today I told you that though there is an antithesis in principle, unbelievers cannot work in God's world according to their own philosophy. They are going to be inconsistent. They are going to say things and do things that do not comport with what they profess about the nature of reality and how we know and how we should live our lives. And so one of the things you're going to be asking is, how is it that what we both want to say about, say, torturing children being wrong, how is it that these things that we hold in common can be true? Which worldview makes sense out of that? Which worldview makes human experience intelligible? Now, in asking which worldview, I'm asking what network of presuppositions about reality, knowledge, and ethics makes human experience intelligible. What do we mean by human experience? Anything. Human experience involves anything whatsoever. You can take the unbeliever and talk to him or her about any subject whatsoever. And you can talk to your milkman, or you can talk to the philosophy professor about anything they want to talk about, and the same problems are going to arise. By human experience, we simply mean all those things that we believe and do, all those things that we say, all of our conduct, all of our attitudes. And so that you can take your roommate in college and deal with anything that's part of his or her experience and challenge them to make it intelligible. Now, what do we mean by make it intelligible? Which philosophy of reality, knowledge, and ethics can take those things which we believe and do in human experience and make them intelligible? And by that we mean make sense of them or see them as meaningful. Perhaps the easiest way to illustrate this would be to talk about an ethical belief. If you have a roommate or a professor who says that a certain kind of activity, maybe oppressing the poor, is immoral, what you're going to be asking is, well now, Professor, what outlook on reality, knowledge, and ethics will make what you've just said about oppressing the poor meaningful? Let's assume that we are in the worldview of evolution.